Good afternoon, everybody. All right. My name is Nate Moxley. I'll be your moderator today. I work for the Department of Neighborhoods P-Patch program. Shout out to everybody that's within the P-Patch community. It's 50 years strong of the P-Patch community program. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our panelists today. I'm going to quickly read their bios, have them introduce a bit about their work, and then we'll jump into the questions. We will have an opportunity for folks to ask questions as well at the end. Is that a hot mic?
You should give that to them.
Okay. All right. Is this one on? Testing? Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into this. So starting with Demarus Tevuk. She is an environmental educator focusing on traditional ecological knowledge, native plants, and native pollinators. She's an Inupiaq woman from Nome, Alaska, and she enjoys sharing her research on the definition of sustainability from an indigenous perspective. Demarus is a program manager for the Seattle Indian Services Commission, a member of the Rising Tides Indigenous Planning Group, and a board member of Common Acre. Anthony Johnson is an Anishinaabe and citizen of the Red Lake Nation in northern Minnesota. Anthony was born and raised in South Minneapolis. He studied at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, where he graduated with a degree in finance. He moved to Seattle in May of 2021. Shortly thereafter, he started at the @Al Café as a manager at the Chief Seattle Club. He cares deeply about hunting, fishing, and foraging for traditional foods and decolonizing his diet. Neli Jasuja, she/they, is the Environmental Justice Programs Manager at Young Women Empowered, YWE, particularly focused on youth farming and food justice programming at Mara Farm in South Park. They first connected with YWE as a mentor with the Nature Connections program and fell in love with the powerful intergenerational community of diverse women and gender-expansive folks supporting each other in the outdoors. During this time, she served in an AmeriCorps term with Solid Ground, teaching nutrition, cooking, and gardening with elementary school students experiencing food insecurity. Neli also organizes with Got Green, Climate Justice for Black Lives, and with fellow South Asian community around BIPOC solidarity. She is passionate about working at the intersections of environmental, racial, and social justice within community, healing with the land, and growing food with young people while disrupting racism and injustice within the food system. And lastly, we have Jaydalen Blossom, she/her. Jaydalen began her journey in YWE as a youth participant in 2018 with the Nature Connections program. Since then, she's been involved in YWE, Create and Write, Lead Youth Leadership Council, and in recent times, she has been involved in YWE Grow. While participating in Grow, Jaydalen found her calling, and now she wants to help others find a sense of deep connection with themselves and with community by connecting with nature. She recently joined the YWE team this year as the program assistant for the Grow Spring program. Besides her immense love and gratitude for the YWE community, Jaydalen loves spending quality time with her loved ones, being in nature, facilitating yoga. She recently graduated from the Heart Center, and connecting with people from all walks of life. Join me in welcoming today's panelists. All right, so we're going to jump into this by having folks just kind of introduce their work, tell you a little bit about their work and how it connects with today's topic. So we're going to start with Demarus.
Hi, can you hear me? All right. I brought a presentation, but I don't know if we're able to bring it up. For my work with the Rising Tides group, from December of 2021 through July of last year, we had a Native neighborhood survey that we were looking for at least 400 responses from people who are Native and Indigenous who have a relationship with Seattle. We got an amazing 768 responses. And what I wanted to share today was a map that shows the diversity of our urban Native community that we are from all over North America. The other thing I wanted to share with the presentation was a map of where people live in Seattle. And so for this study, we also did a food talking circle, and we had support from Office of Sustainability and Environment for the update to the food action plan. So we had a talking circle that was co-sponsored by OSE. And we actually had the meeting at Mara Farms, outdoors. That was, we didn't mean to do it this way, but we actually accidentally had it at the same time as the Seafair Indian Days powwow. But even though we had it during the powwow, we still had a really great group of people come out and share their thoughts about food security, food access, and building a neighborhood for the urban Native community. And then as a board member with the Common Acre, we are planting camas at a site in South Seattle. It's called the Green Line. We planted the camas. We planted the camas last October, and the place that we harvested it from is in Oregon. I'm pretty sure that it is an intact pre-contact camas site, which is really, really special because camas prairies were lost during colonization. The reason why they were lost is two reasons. First, access to the prairies was denied. Settlers would put up fences, but settlers would also let their cows and their pigs go through, and they destroyed the camas prairies. So just last weekend, we checked on the camas, and they're doing really well. They're sprouting, and so happy that they made it. We weren't sure if the bulbs were going to do okay. I guess the other thing about myself I wanted to share is, like, I'm Native Alaskan, and I'm really privileged to know my traditional food really well. I grew up eating whale, seal, caribou. My older brother is a hunter and a whaling captain. And I went to high school in Neah Bay on the Makah Reservation. During the time when they were seeking to, sorry if I'm speaking too long, but to get their treaty rights to be able to whale again. And they came up against a huge force of public opinion opposition to their right to whale. And food is so central to culture. And all of the work that I do, I lean heavily on a group of values that I identified in some research while I was getting my degree in environmental studies at UW. I have a set of values that are related to sustainability, and I was just thinking today, they're all related to food. It's all about how you gather food and then share it with people, how you take care of the land, so that you can have the food that you need to share with each other and take care of each other. Like every value has some connection to food, and and that's about how to live. So, I don't know. I was hoping that I could share my presentation, a couple of slides today. The report will hopefully be shared soon through the Naha Illahee Fund website. That's the nonprofit that fiscally sponsored our work. Rising Tides has, we have the goal of building community spaces that are missing in Seattle. And one of the other big themes from our survey response is that people want access to the land. And they want access to the land and to grow food as part of cultural revitalization programs. So being able to have gardens in any way, rooftops, balconies, and then open space, it's all really important to our community. So I think that's it.
Anin Buju Ginoa, Jawano Benes, Indigo, Anishinaabe Mong. Hey everyone, greetings. My name is Anthony. As Nate said, I'm a Anishinaabe, citizen of Red Lake, up in northern Minnesota. And I am the cafe manager at Chief Seattle Club, the ḵál̓al cafe manager. ḵál̓al Cafe opened on Giving Tuesday, November 29th of Native American Heritage Month last year. The cafe is on the ground floor of the ḵál̓al housing building, which is Chief Seattle Club's first permanent housing complex, built from the ground up by Chief Seattle Club, right down in Pioneer Square. So the club has been around for 50 some odd years in Seattle, but has been really exponentially growing over the past couple of years, to the point where we were able to really build this massive capital campaign to be able to provide permanent supportive housing for our homeless Native relatives out there on the streets. There's a pretty big disparity in the homeless population within Seattle. Native people make up around 1% of the overall population of Seattle, but I've seen figures anywhere from 10 to 15% of the homeless population. So there's clearly a disparity there, and there's a multitude of reasons for why that disparity exists that could take possibly the entire time to go into each one of those facets. But suffice to say that there is a disparity there that Chief Seattle Club wants to step in and to resolve. So the cafe is. The cafe is, like I said, been open for the past 4 months, and my mission and the mission of the cafe, might seem a little bit distant between a nonprofit providing permanent supportive housing and, a business that's open to the public. But I see like a pretty clear connection between the cafe and the broader mission of the club, and what that is, I believe that reclaiming our traditional food pathways and our connection to our traditional foods is an important way to heal in the wounds of colonization that Native people have faced. And so through that mission of serving traditional foods at the cafe, we're able to offer a space for Native people to come in and to see some traditional foods that perhaps they haven't seen in a long time, since maybe their family was removed from the reservation and brought out here to Seattle. And so, I want to serve as that space for folks to come in and to learn and relearn their connections to their traditional foods. And I believe that's one of the ways that we could, really start to regain our sense of self and who we are and our connection to food. Because connection to food, it is so important to our culture. I know as Anishinaabe people, we really are, we're really nothing without wild rice, without manoman. That food is directly tied into our origin story and who we are as people. And so there's really a direct link between us and that food, and without that, it's tough to imagine what our culture would be and who our people would be. So, with that being said, I think that the cafe serves as a place to be able to spark that conversation with people and gain awareness of the fight that a lot of Native folks are having for reclaiming their traditional foods and protecting their traditional foods. We have a lot of issues with pipelines going through our wild rice beds back home, oil pipelines, so gaining awareness of that, as well as raising awareness and the broader support of the average Seattleite and understanding the mission of Chief Seattle Club, so that the cafe, kind of serves as a space for people to come in and obviously, hopefully get some really good food. I oversee the kitchen, so I hope, if everyone's been there, I hope you like the food. It won't hurt my feelings if you don't, But yeah, I mean, I think so. It's, it's an entry point into learning about traditional foods and learning about the work of the club. So yeah, really honored to be, doing this work and to be here with all of you today, and excited to, kind of share more about, some of the work that we're doing. So, Amigach.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neli. I am the Environmental Justice Programs Manager at Young Women Empowered, Why We. I feel very honored to be here with y'all on this panel and everyone here. So Why We, Young Women Empowered, our mission is to cultivate the power of diverse young women and gender-expansive youth to be creative change makers within their communities. We do that through a lot of different types of youth programming, ranging from creative expression to social justice issues, and Jaydalen and I get to be on the environmental justice and food sovereignty side of things. We primarily work with BIPOC youth, queer and trans youth, folks who are often pushed to the margins, and yeah. So some of our goals at Mara Farm in South Park, where we get to do our Why We Grow program, which is focused on farming and food justice. Our primary goal, and maybe I'll say our foundational goal, is to create a space where our young people can feel a sense of joy, healing, connection with each other, and also in relationship with their environment and the land. We know that essentially all the youth that we work with, whether they're indigenous to this land or part of diaspora, have experienced trauma at the side of the land, whether that's personally or ancestrally. And so we recognize a lot of young people coming into the space at Mara Farm in South Park. Many of them don't see themselves there, or many of them feel unsafe in these spaces. So it's kind of foundational for us to create a place where they can kind of regulate their nervous systems and, lean on each other, but also their environment, plant allies, the creek, the soil, to start to kind of embody into the space and into the land. So that's the first thing we do. From there, we also like to develop skills. We call them skills for interdependence. So we recognize that a lot of these systems, food systems included, were not built for us in our communities. They are steeped in racism and injustice. So we like to think about how can we develop skills where we can take care of each other. So that includes gardening and growing our own food, our cultural foods. But it also means food preservation, woodworking, ecosystem restoration, chicken care, fruit tree care, mushroom cultivation. And the idea is that, even through these brief workshops, we can start building those skills, building that interest. But the idea, too, is that, we can take care of each other for now and in the future. And they can also go on to share those skills with their communities, families, and be leaders in these spaces as well. Next, we really focus on kind of learning about environmental justice and food justice. There's often a narrative that this is new for BIPOC community to be connecting with the outdoors and growing food, and we recognize that this is like the opposite, like this is core to who we are. And so it's about remembering those connections and those lessons, and getting to really highlight the people whose shoulders we stand on, and also recognizing the original stewards of the land that we are so, so lucky to get to steward at Mara Farm. And then, our last goal is to, we say, love on community. So we have cohorts of about 20 young people and about 4 adult mentors that spend time with us at the farm. We have a spring cohort, fall cohort, and then we do paid internship in the summer. And so throughout all of these cohorts, the young people get to get creative and plan offerings that they want to share with the larger community, and that can look like community events. We've made a zine. sharing food, sharing gardening resources, so kind of sharing that abundance outwards. Yeah, so I'll pause there.
I guess there isn't too much to add from me to share about ₦álヂ, but I guess being here, I can be that representative of just the joy and love and healing that I receive from being a part of ₦álヂ. And yeah, I'm also just here to learn and listen in to also do better. Yeah.
Maybe I'll add one thing, Jaydalen. You were in the first group of young people to ever visit the farm. Do you want to share a little bit about your story?
Yeah. I started in 2019, and that's like the height of the pandemic, and everything was kind of just like unsure things. People were going through their journeys with dealing with how they are showing up in spaces, and why we grow was my safe space, like where I can actually connect with other people, connect with myself most importantly, and build my relationship with the land. That's where I received a lot of healing. I remember many times where I would show up with whatever I was holding in the land, just being in that space to really be who I am, and learning all the ways to show up in community was very healing for me, still is very healing. And now I get to have the opportunity to work alongside with Neli and Taya, who are holding down the grow. Yeah, I'm very grateful.
All right, thank you all for intros. We're going to jump into this, and I think this is a good segue. What you just said, Jaydalen, is a good segue for this next question. And I think we're going to start, we'll start with you, Jaydalen, because it actually kind of just perfect segue. So can you tell us a little bit about your pandemic experience around food access and justice, and how you see this as an area, as an avenue for healing and connection?
Well, the program that you hear Neli and I talk about, Grow, I think it's a great outlet for especially youth who, from my experience, I've felt a sense of I didn't feel like a sense of belonging or a sense of self, or I felt very powerless. So being in that space, a container to really grow and heal and just learn ways that I can show up, it's like healing and also putting into action. It's like having those three things, like releasing through the trauma, like talking about things that have hurt us, and then going through ways how we can heal by like taking care of the land and supporting each other, and then putting it into action by having meetings where we plan events that we want to do. I think those three things have been very important in terms of healing and food justice. Yeah.
Neli, do you want to tackle that question?
Sure. Yeah, I think the pandemic, so we were about to start heading into Mara Farm, like waking up the garden right when lockdown happened, and there was just so much going on. I was really grateful in the pandemic that, so we had like young people and then also their parents and caregivers. They were like, I can't be inside anymore. I feel really isolated. How would you feel if we came out there to kind of help y'all at the garden? Like, we feel okay with it. Because we at that point had shut down all of our programming in person. And one of the parents was a physician. So I was like, okay, if you say you can come out here, sure. And then we started doing it, and we were like, oh, this feels okay. So we started our Why We Grow programming at the farm June 2020, and we've had young people out there since then. And the rest of our Why We programming was online basically through 2021. So like the fact that we could be a space where young people could come together in person, they were telling us this was the only time they were interacting with other people their age in person. So I think that sense of like isolation, panic, fear, rage, with social justice, racial justice uprisings. I think there was a huge need, in addition to what folks were getting at home, online, in social media, through the news of like what's going on and how to plug in. I think they also needed that mirror space where they can be in person, tap into like their physical, embodied, present space rather than like the mediated experience of just being bombarded with the news and the panic. So I feel extremely grateful the timing, because we started at Mara Farm in 2019. The fact that we had that space to be able to invite folks into was really huge. And then with that, like Jaydalen said, young people were coming kind of fried, like feeling a lot. So the fact that they could come in and feel, yes, their joy of being able to connect with each other, but also the deep sadness, the rage, like I mentioned, and have somewhere to kind of channel it, like with their hands in the land, like, in the dirt, by the creek, like it kind of created that outlet for them to release the stress that was building. So I feel really grateful for that. And also, like Jaydalen said, that purpose piece, like we were feeling a complete lack of agency at that time. So the fact that young people could plug into immediate, like, food sovereignty actions that we were taking. South Park is an amazing community, the way that they showed up during the pandemic. South Park experiences food apartheid, which is a lack of fresh local produce, organic produce, disproportionately impacting communities of color, many immigrant communities in the area. So neighbors just like came out in full force, started the food pantry system. We helped support meal distribution, and then all the food that we were growing at Mara Farm went into the food pantries, went to the local food bank. Neighbors also organized El Mercadito, the first neighbor-organized farmers market in South Park. So we got to plug into these efforts and like feel that sense of purpose and agency that was so lacking at the time. And just want to give a shout out to Monica Perez and LaShawna Williams, Cultivate South Park, Urban Fresh Food Collective, doing that work there. Yeah. And I also want to shout out Taya Carlisle. I meant to mention her name earlier. She does this work with us. And if you don't know her, there's a beautiful article in the Department of Neighborhood's blog about Taya. Yeah.
Anthony, I'll reiterate the question just to have
helpful,
it fresh.
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your pandemic experience around food access, food justice, and how you see this area as an avenue for healing and connection?
Yeah. Well, in fall of 2019, I went. I grew up in the city. I've always been like an urban Indian, urban native, and never really had a connection to culture. A lot of folks that grow up on the reservation do. So I didn't have that as a child and as teenager, and it really took my sister, who's probably one of the most important people in my lives, who is an Ojibwe language teacher. She's an immersion teacher at on our tribe. They just opened an Ojibwe immersion school, and she's the kindergarten teacher. And she really took it upon herself to reclaim the language and learn the language, and is now able to teach that to the little ones. So that's their first language growing up, and so she was instrumental in being able for me to reclaim my indigeneity, being separated from the community like that. So, that being said, I in fall of 2019 went on my first deer hunting trip, in kind of near Red Lake, but it unsuccessful. But it really changed the way that I look about food, the way that I look at food, and the way that I looked at meat, and it really flipped a switch where I wanted to. Now it's pretty much hunting is pretty much one of the only things I think about to my partner's demise, I guess. But like, it planted that seed, and then with the pandemic, happening 6 or so odd months after that hunting trip, I really started to question, question everything in my life. I had studied business and studied finance, and was working for a corporation who shall remain nameless, and didn't feel like I fit in, didn't feel like I had a purpose in life. And so I went to the drawing board, and I just started to think about how I could give back to the community, how I could get involved in the indigenous world, in the native world. There's a lot of folks that go into medicine, there's a lot of folks that go into planning, government, and I thought about food, that's what I wanted to do. So while I was lucky enough to be in that corporate position working from home, pretty much had all my meetings camera off, mute, and was just cooking just as much as I possibly could, just learning everything that I could about indigenous foods, reading books, reading blog posts, going to the other native restaurants in Minneapolis to learn about what those pioneers in indigenous foods were doing, what they were cooking, what they were making, and knew that that's where I wanted to pivot my career, and what I wanted to do with my life was to just get into indigenous foods by any means possible, really, by any means necessary. So through that process, then I threw together a little PowerPoint, a little portfolio of some food that I had made, and sent it over to Chief Seattle Club and said, hey, this is what I want to do. Doesn't really fit with the cafe, but this is this is where I want to go with my life. And they took a gamble on that, which was pretty cool. I'd never worked in food service or anything. I was coming out of the corporate world. So for me personally, there has been a lot of healing and reclaiming, I guess, my sense of self and my self-worth too. I always felt it felt selfish to be, I guess, working for a company that wasn't, directly benefiting the lives of Native people. And so I was able to hopefully, take a step in the right direction where I'm able to give back to the community. And then I guess as we talk about just what happens what happened in the pandemic was all the traditional protocols and all the ways of harvesting traditional food were shut down. So in March, it's the Anishinaabe New Year, it's the Ojibwe New Year. We're tapping maple trees and we're turning that sap into maple sugar and then maple syrup. And obviously, it's around three years ago where we weren't able to go out, but it's pretty amazing to kind of see the way that we're able to get creative and find safe ways to go out and collect sap and go berry picking and go hunting and everything like that. And so I was able to get back into it, after kind of flipping that switch in 2019 and pausing throughout 2020, and I know everyone's life was on hold, but then 2021, it's been full steam ahead of Nate said it in the bio, just trying to decolonize the diet, only eat foods that were here before contact, and it's hard to do, but I think having that as the lens and how I try to make meals and feed myself, and I guess in the work that I do at the cafe, that's always going to be try to be the mission of both of those aspects of life.
The pandemic was a big disruption for me. I usually bring my kids up in the summer to Nome to visit my mom and my aunts and cousins, and we go berry picking and fishing, and we pick greens. But I wasn't able to go in 2019 because of moving to a new house, and then during the pandemic we didn't get to go home either. And it was kind of depressing because I have a lot of native food in my freezer and in my pantry, but I really don't like eating it by myself because it's a family thing that I do with my mom and my kids. So it was hard to not be able to go home and reinforce those traditions with my children. But instead, it really forced me to get to know my new neighborhood, and I've always known, well, not always. I mean, I've always had an interest in plants because I grew up outside all day long in the summer in Nome, and my mom would send me under the bushes to go pick her favorite, because I was small enough, go find her favorite herbs in Alaska. So I have, what is it called? Plant literacy, I think. I can tell the difference between plants. So learning about native plants in Washington State was pretty easy for me. And I was always interested in it. I really enjoy doing it. So during the summer of 2020, I took a lot of walks and got to know, just kind of paid attention to what's in the forest by my house. I found a patch of trailing blackberries. It's still kind of secret, I'm not going to tell you where it is. But I invited my brother, he lives in Kirkland, to come, and he came and wore his mask, and we went outside and picked berries. I think I still have a bag in my freezer. But that felt like a really beautiful gift from the world, to be able to find trailing blackberries. If you get a chance to eat them, they are super tasty. I think loganberries or marionberries, they're one of the plants that were used to, because the flavor is so good, that they're one of the grandparents of that breed of berry. And there were other plants that I tried. I got a little sick because I don't know what I'm doing, but it was just a nice way to kind of force me to get to know the local native plants and kind of build a relationship with the land in a little different way. And then I think a lot of issues that came out of the pandemic, just our communities have been saying that things are unfair and that there's so much systemic racism that hasn't been addressed for the Native community, and the pandemic really made it out in the open more. We couldn't ignore it anymore, and I'm grateful for that shift in the mainstream culture, the mainstream I guess conversation about the issues. I still think there's a lot of work to do. Let's see, I don't know. Last summer was the first time that we were able to go back to Alaska, and I really appreciated. I try to go up for 3 weeks because it's so expensive to fly back home. And we were there for 8 days, and it was a whirlwind, and of course the weather was bad while we were there. But yeah, I always appreciate what we're able to gather, because appreciation is one of the sustainable values. You have to be thankful while you're gathering, and that's a way that you give back to the world, is by expressing thankfulness to the plants and animals. But I think the pandemic made it a little more meaningful, where I was really, really grateful to be able to go back home, go back to the tundra, and be with the land again. So, yeah, I don't know.
Actually, the next question, what you're saying really, again, works well with our next question. So I'm going to start with you, Demarus, and ask, how do we as a community intentionally make space to think about Indigenous sovereignty, food sovereignty, and racial justice together? One of the things from our food equity talking circle that we did last year, one of the big things that I brought up for the food action plan update is to just even point out that traditional first food is not even viewed as a food.
There's a lot of native plants that are edible, and they're just not viewed as something to eat. For the Common Acre work, the Green Line site, I also want to just invite everybody to go check it out. That is a native plant restoration site. That program was set up before me and everyone on our, we flipped our board. We used to be white led. Now it's a BIPOC organization, BIPOC led. And the program structure for the Green Line, their goal was to plant native plants for bees and birds, but they don't view the native plants as serving a purpose for people. And I view all of the plants that are there as medicine and food, and as a way for us to help Coast Salish tribes build a relationship with the plants that are there. And trying to work from the bottom up to change that view of what the purpose of land is. It's really hard. A lot of these ideas about what conservation is, what land management is, what's the role of humanity in nature, a lot of that is really hard, and to change the view of what is our purpose and what do we do. I still try to change people's viewpoint all the time about conservation can and should include people. That when there's a lot of evidence that shows when people are interacting with the land, the nature does better, it grows better, it's healthier. And to remove people from the land is harmful to the plants and animals. So I think we need a shift in mindset about what it means to be human and how to interact with plants. I forget, what was the other?
Really around finding ways, acknowledging these are intersectional issues, right?
Yeah. How to support
food sovereignty, racial justice,
Yeah.
and really this idea of making space. Obviously today we're making space to think about these issues. How do you see, in some of your work, aligning with those intersectional issues, and again, continually to make space to talk about, to deal with, to work on?
I think also one of the biggest things that our the groups that I've been working with keep struggling is just having land that we can manage it on our own, on our terms, and how we want to manage it, and to not have a top-down definition of what you can do with the space, being able to have the freedom to grow what we want and manage the land in the way that we decide is good. That's something that keeps coming up. And there's also a theme of wanting to be able to co-create funding opportunities. Don't have the top-down, they're telling us what we should do. Our community, a lot of our work is grassroots. Being able to have the power at the same level, so that we have equal, or maybe even a little stronger voice in what we would like to do, and co-creating the opportunities for that to actually happen.
Excellent.
So I guess the way that I'm thinking about this is, through the direct work at the Café. So I was telling Demarus, I built the staffing model of the Café, and in my infinite wisdom, I thought that I would have the capacity to be both the lead cook, run the kitchen, as well as do all the admin stuff related to the Café, which it turns out that I can't. So I've been probably like a 95-5 split between 95% in the kitchen, doing the day-to-day operations of running that, and then probably 5% on the kind of bigger picture admin work. So 4 months under our belts and starting to rethink how the staffing model is set up, I'm definitely going to try to have a more healthy balance and a better split between those two. And the reason that, kind of give a little inside baseball there is because the Café is a place that I want to be a space to have these conversations, to have to be a place for Native folks and non-Native folks to come in and learn about food sovereignty and learn about traditional foods, and beyond just simply eating the foods, but in presentations, Native markets, makers markets, and really be a gathering space for the community. So that is, I guess, something to look forward to. That got a bit of a better grasp on how to run the shop and kind of reconfigure my time. I think I'm going to be able to spend more time on planning those events, advertising those events, and gathering other voices in the Indigenous food space and letting those folks share about the work that they're doing, so that people can learn about all the different avenues of the Indigenous foods and the food sovereignty movement. But I think it's also important to maybe mention that a lot of these topics are very high up on like the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Like these topics are not something that a day-to-day member of Chief Seattle Club who's riding the buses all night to stay safe and to stay dry. It's a very difficult conversation and a topic for us to talk about with them, simply because they're trying to make it to the next day. So that's, I guess, like a duality that I always try to think about, or just to keep in mind that a lot of the folks that we serve and our core focus of the club and the focus of the work that we're doing is, providing meals every day, providing hygiene services, showers, those day-to-day supplies that folks need. And then on top of that, I guess, looking at the bigger picture and trying to dance between those two kind of tensions that I see.
Thank you, Anthony. I want to jump to our last question. I'm going to start with Neli and Jaydalen. So I feel like this is a really important question, and thank you to everybody that's here, everybody that's tuning in online. But the question is, again, for Neli and Jaydalen, how would you like to see city staff and community leaders supporting your work?
Hello? Let's see. I have a few thoughts. I think echoing what Demarus had shared around access to land. So the way that we access our plot at Mara Farm is through the city, through the Department of Neighborhoods. Thank you. And we're really grateful, and we also are in good relationship with y'all. Nate's the person I talk to, actually. And just recognizing, like, wanting to honor, what's happening with Nurturing Roots right now, of, that they have been investing their time and love into the land and community for 8 years, and then that can be taken away from them. So I think, that's one piece, is like access to land, that where people can actually grow roots and not feel like they can be displaced at any moment, and not actually be displaced at any moment. I think that's really important, and maybe they can share a little bit more about that too. I think the other piece is, we are really also grateful to be funded through city grant programs. That is an incredible, the Environmental Justice Fund. Like, these are incredible opportunities for us to access needed resources. So keep up with that. And I think there can be challenges with funding models, asking, communities to compete for resources. That is, for a finite set of resources, that is really challenging. And the other piece too of, like, always wanting community to be doing something new or different, like the act of actually sustaining and allowing programming or whatever we're working on to naturally evolve. It might not look like a big, shiny new program, but valuing like a natural, organic evolution in the way that, plants do and our earth does. I think that's really important. And I think another piece would be, I think sometimes interacting with city folks, again, really grateful to have strong relationship, but sometimes it can seem disjointed as someone coming in from a community-based organization realm. I can talk to a lot of folks from many, parts of the city that might not know each other or know that I'm talking. So I sometimes have to play that middle person, but with that, sometimes we fall through the cracks as well. So encouraging I don't know what y'all call it, interdepartmental relationship, I think would be really, really great. And then
and as for how I guess we'd like the city to help support is to care to listen, especially with the youth, us young people. I think we all have been young people, so I think it's very important that to create that healing, that generational healing, we listen to the people and especially ourselves, because we are a mirror to each other. I know that even the mentors, like speaking that why we have mentors who are in their young adult years, and then we have us youth interacting with them. In that already I can see healing and change. So I think just being able to communicate and treat each other with that same respect is really important when it comes to like how we can be involved with each other, because everything is connected, and that's what we get to learn being at the farm, that we're all connected and somehow, and we all get to make that change. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe I have one thing to add, but I want to hear what they have to say first, and then I can add.
Well, and I just want to say thank you for calling out the interdepartmental communication piece. The city is a large entity, and we could do better with that. So thank you for calling that out. Our time is limited, but I do want to hear from Anthony and Demarus on this last question about how we can better support your work.
I think, I guess keep it brief. I think capital is super important. Receiving funding, we have one grant through the Food Equity Fund, Department of Neighborhood, that we've received. That's a 2-year grant, but margins are pretty thin in food service, and Chief Seattle Club, we try to pay our folks a living wage. No one at the club earns under $20 an hour, and so and benefits and all this stuff. So it's expensive to run a business within a nonprofit, and so direct investment through capital and supporting with easy grant requirements like this, grant that we have is offering, where it's kind of this outcome-based, outcome-based invoicing, where we're able to put together attainable goals, and if we achieve those goals, we're able to invoice for certain amounts of money. So keeping those administrative burdens down, and I guess increasing donation of capital, or not donation, but access to capital is really important.
I'll just repeat, and the competition for limited funding is super frustrating. I know, like, one of the previous reports from 2014 with the urban native community said we want to be able to be cooperative, but the grant funding is very competitive. Also, all the grant reporting is so much work, and the grant objectives don't always match what the community wants to do, like what's important to us. So that, again, just co-creating the grant opportunities and the parameters, like what should be reporting, and what should the money be used for? I think some people everyday people just need money. Like guaranteed basic income, that's a thing, a small project that I'm working on. I know Rising Tides would love to be able to give our Native neighborhood findings presentation to city staff. It hasn't happened yet. We are so eager to share all of the data like the big picture data that we've gathered. And we would also love to have funding to be able to dig into the qualitative data, because 768 people wrote thousands and thousands of comments in our survey, and we don't have to go do the outreach again. We can dig through the data and find visioning and design and like answers to all kinds of questions. Let's see. I need capacity building support. I keep saying it, and it's like I have to go find the opportunities and also apply for funding to pay myself to learn how to do things. And it just feels like there's a lot of, I actually came across a program that was about capacity building, but we don't even have the basic things that they were looking for in order for me to apply. So there's just a lot of things that end up being restrictions, like a lot of well-meaning, but maybe a little out of touch with what is actually needed. But yeah, capacity building I think is a huge thing. I would like to try to get more people excited about planning and project management, all like being able to build our own places and like have radical design. Like all of that stuff is like really exciting and also long overdue.
Thank you, Demarus. And the Department of Neighborhoods is going to be hosting Rising Tides next month, and we're looking forward to that and hearing about all the amazing work that's happened. All right, so as we close out, I just want to thank everybody again for joining us, and just join me in thanking our panelists for their work and for their contributions today and sharing their work.